You are listening to Life in a Border Town. I'm Walter Patrician, the producer of this podcast. Life in a Border Town explores some of the old stories that transformed the Windsor Detroit region, physically, culturally, symbolically, and more. This story is called Electric Streetcars. Salute and farewell, and salute again. We will start this story 2 years ago, in 2017.
The queue line will be operating starting this morning.
Yeah, this is such an exciting thing. A big party is planned later on, but as 7 Action News reporter Matthew Smith tells us, the real party is this weekend when the rides are free. Hey, that sounds like a great deal, Matt.
133 years ago, the same thing happened, but in Windsor. It all started with a dream. The year was 1885. A Windsor councillor visited his hometown of Brighton, England. He saw there an electric trolley operating on a beach.
Come, dear Jane, now let's get together. Don't you love that nice summer weather? So let's go to that beautiful sea.
He loved the trolley so much, he got a picture and description of the car and brought it back to Windsor in hopes to create something similar. His name is Richard Bogham, and he couldn't carry out this dream alone. J.W. Tringham, considered an electrical genius, agreed to build a railway line connecting Windsor to Walkerville if Bogham could get a franchise for him. Tringham needed Bogham to persuade council to approve this project. On May 26, 1886, the first streetcar made its way out of a big barn near what used to be the Peabody Bridge in Walkerville. It was a scrawny, awkward object. It groaned and creaked. Lyndon Clark Booth, the motorman of the streetcar, felt a vibration beneath his feet. A moment passed. Tringham was standing on the road with his face all smiles, never dreaming they would go to Windsor, with a crowd of shouting men and boys spread out behind it. Tringham was standing on the road with his face all smiles, never dreaming they would go to Windsor. The motorman decided not to wait for Tringham and ran away with his car. When the car got quite a distance, Tringham started to run after them, waving his arms. He was not alone. The crowd returned. They started running. Tringham was in the lead. The Detroit Free Press on June 10th, 1886 said, "At 2 o'clock yesterday, there stood on Sandwich Street, Windsor, over 1,000 people. The eyes of the crowd turned towards Walkerville as if expecting an arrival of a load of products of that alcoholic town. A busman shouted at intervals in a sad way, 'All aboard for Walkertown.' Nobody went aboard. Around the bend of the road, there came bowling along the electric car at a lively rate. It looked like the streetcar gone crazy. As the streetcar stood there, the citizens had a sight of 3 different stages of travel. The outdated bus stood at the south side of the road. This represented the last century. In the center of the street stood the sandwich horse car. It represented the present century, soon to close. On the north side stood the electric car representing the next century, the 20th century. The Windsor Record of June 11th, 1886 said, "Windsor deserves to be proud. Its citizens have a right to tilt their heads several degrees back and to swell their chests forward. We have an electric street railway. No other place in Canada has such a road. Detroit dreams about such an enterprise for some time, but the slow people of that place did not tackle such an enterprise until they saw how Windsor did it. The problem is solved. The railway is real. We could scoot up to Walkerville on a streak of lightning, and we'll soon do the same to Sandwich and beyond. Whoop, go away, old world. You're too slow for Windsor." All of Detroit visited Windsor and Walkerville during the first few days after the car was placed in operation. The This was several months later before Detroit had its own first streetcar, and the Windsor-Walkerville firm installed and operated it. No fares were charged during the first 3 days of the car's operation. Hundreds of Detroit and border folk rode free on the car. After the 3 days, it was placed in regular operation. Less than 2 months later, Mr. Tringham, the man who is credited in bringing the streetcar to life in Windsor, died. With him died his plans to extend electric car service in the area. The railway he left behind was soon in difficulty. It was ahead of its time. The transition from horse cars to streetcars was not easy. While still using horses to pull the cars, in the summer of 1890, 2 cars collided on Sandwich Street. 40 passengers on the summer car were scared to death, and the horse on the number 1 car died. The electric car won out over the horse car in Windsor and Essex County. This service expanded greatly on both sides of the Detroit River. It reached its peak by the middle 1920s. The metropolitan areas of Detroit and Windsor each had its network of electric streetcar lines. They later grew suburban lines connected with centers in each neighborhood. In 1929, in the City of Windsor's first planning report, urban planner Thomas Adams imagined the existing street railways network to expand. In the report, he wrote, "There is no indication that the streetcar will ever be displaced by the motor bus for local street transportation."
I mean, if you look at it, like I said, in 1886, we hit the first electric streetcar before Toronto, Montreal, which were 2 of the big cities at the time back then. My name is Bernie Drouillard, and I'm a transportation historian.
I asked him if the Windsor streetcar system influenced other cities since it was invented.
Well, they all did, because the builders, tried to use the same type of electrical equipment, and they tried to commonize on a lot of it. And when one made an improvement, everybody else made that improvement.
Again, the Windsor streetcar system inspired later the Detroit system, Toronto, Montreal, and many others. To make more sense as to what happened, the electric streetcar system failed after Tringham's attempt, but the Detroit United Railways bought out Windsor's system and electrified it.
Just a short history. In 1920, the Hydroelectric Power Commission, which is Ontario Hydro at the time, they purchased the SW&A.
The SW&A stands for the Sandwich, Windsor, and Amherstburg Railway.
From the Detroit United Railway on behalf of the municipalities. I think there was 18 of them at the time, and they ran the system till about 1932. But they didn't do a good job at it. And they ran it into a deficit all the time. The other part, the politicians of the day always wanted a low fare. And you can't do that. You have to have a half a cent increase here or there. They were part of the blame, as far as I'm concerned, at the time, was the politicians and poor management from Hydroelectric. So by that time, they were like $7 or $9 million in debt. So W.H. Furlong was put in charge by the Ontario Municipal Board, part of the Ontario government, to get their money back because they had guaranteed the loans and the bonds. So Furlong come along, and he was looking at the best option, whether to replace the streetcars, whether it was going to be new streetcars, and he found out the cost just was astronomical at the time. So he elected to go with buses. And he started out on the Amherstburg line with two buses, and he ran the two buses and the streetcar for 1 week. And at the end of the week, he pulled the streetcars off because he found out per mile it was cheaper to operate the bus than the streetcar, because the tracks were bad shape, cars were in bad shape, the streetcars, so they had to do something. So he turned around and started operating buses, and then he would pick up a few more, and then did the Tecumseh line next. And he gradually worked through all the lines in the city. So by 1939, May of 39, all the lines were operated by buses in the city of Windsor. In that, because like I said, the tracks were just so bad, and the cost to buy new tracks and new cars, it was cheaper to do the buses, and that's how it came about in Windsor. The demise of the streetcar, like I said, was the automobile, but it was also General Motors, Firestone and Goodyear Tire, and a number of the oil companies at the time who bought streetcar systems up to convert them to buses. And and that did happen. And what this group would do when they bought a streetcar system, they burnt the cars right away. They destroyed the cars, so they couldn't go back. So you had to go to buses or trolley buses at the time. And General Motors was very big into buses. They were probably the leader in buses manufacturing for years. They lost it as time went on, but that was another factor that didn't help the streetcar industry. Because they had this business of, they wanted to sell buses, and when you have oil companies, they sell gas, diesel fuel, and lubricants. Rubber tire companies sell rubber tires to the buses. You need all that to operate them. So they were all in it. And actually, I think they did go to court. They were sued, and they were fined $1 each. That was their penalty. So, there was many factors in the demise of the streetcar.
Right. The electric railway triumphed and then passed into oblivion. Windsor discontinued its electric railways in May of 1939. Detroit discontinued theirs in 1956. However, not all Windsor streetcars ended up destroyed or abandoned.
There was the SW&A put they had a for sale notice in the paper. You could buy a large car, which was a 50-foot long car, complete without the trucks, the whole interior and everything, for $100. Small cars sold for $75. And that was back in 1939. It was in the Border City Star at the time. And there was actually a campground out in Wheatley area that all their cottages were either the large or the small streetcars. And I have a photo, but it's not the greatest, but it shows it. And it shows also one being done as a lunch counter. And there was one in Leamington made into a lunch counter.
When he refers to 351, he is talking about a streetcar the city of Windsor purchased to revive as an artifact. I'll talk more about that later.
Particular one, 351, I believe, was a bait shop. And eventually somebody rolled it from that site near the tracks to the south side of the road, where it ended up, a gentleman built a house around it. And the whole car was right there. They just strapped it up and put their siding on the outside, and they did the drywall on the inside. And they left everything in. So when the drywall was taken off on the inside, they found the windows still there, glass not even cracked. So, all those old cars from Windsor did get reused. Because back then you could put something like that on a lot, and you didn't pay taxes because it wasn't a building. You didn't have a foundation. Mm-hmm. So you were saving taxes. Money that way. But that's what happened.
On the 50th anniversary since the last streetcar traveled across the city, the Hiram Walker Historical Association came together in 1989 to remember this transportation system we had by walking the routes of the old streetcar network. In 2011, there was an idea to bring back streetcars as a transportation network.
Quite frankly, I was very surprised when I heard from you. I wasn't expecting to. It was kind of the first time in many years to hear from someone doing some research on that. Although I will tell you, from time to time, I do run into people who raise the streetcar idea, and they, even throughout my council career, at most random times, I would bump into someone and they'd say, "Hey, whatever happened to that idea? I like that." Hi, this is Al Magnineh. I'm a former city councillor in the city of Windsor. I represented the 10th Ward from 2010 to 2014. What we wanted to do, what the idea was back in 2012, was a vision that we can possibly install track lines, light rail transit lines going east-west along the waterfront corridor, perhaps a north-south line as well to connect it. Something preliminary just to start, and that way, it would be a kind of a pilot project, bringing back some of Windsor's roots as the city that first had the streetcar in Ontario, or in all of Canada, I should say. And it was really a proposal that I think would have been very successful, given the amount of students that have been relocating into the city center, given the amount of people that are going to live in downtown, shop downtown, visit downtown, and we continue to invest as a taxpayer, I'm talking now, and back then even as a decision maker on council, was to continue to invest into the downtown, to bring more people, make it more family friendly, make it more accessible. So this would have made sense, but unfortunately the council of the day saw it different.
Negative feedback followed the councillor's dream project. It's too expensive. Windsor's not Portland. There's no population growth.
A lot of the criticism that came was that there's not enough not enough population or traffic to support it. It's too expensive. We're not Toronto, where it'll add traffic to the streets, and there was just about a dozen of excuses that I found to be very just not true. So if we had an actual debate and a study, we would have been able to answer these questions. Look at places like Detroit, Portland, and other emerging cities that have come out of the Great Recession and have been able to have a strong economic growth because they invested in things like alternative methods of public transportation, be it light rail transit or streetcars, or new buses that had Wi-Fi and GPS. So these are the types of transformative things that, if you have a vision a long time ago and started and implemented it, it's been proven to be very successful. Look at all the cities that implemented it are recording and reporting high success rates. So the criticism was unfounded back then. It still is today, and I bet you that if we had proceeded with at least a pilot project, we would have had something beautiful for this city.
I asked him if there was anything new he learned since trying to bring forward this idea 7 years ago.
Well, I've had the opportunity to be in about 33 countries in the last 7 years, across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. And I can tell you that the cities that are comparable even to Windsor's size and population are investing in alternative methods of public transportation when it comes to light rail cars, streetcars.
In October of 2017, Windsor City Council voted 7-4 to accept a donation. It is a worn-out 50-foot streetcar named 351. It's a steel car built in 1918 from Cincinnati it ran on Windsor city streets. The city plans to spend up to $750,000 to bring it back to life and to showcase it to the public.
I would have rather seen that $750,000 get reinvested into the public transit system for riders to use it, for the citizens to benefit from it. I think people would benefit much more if $750,000 went into investing in a stronger public transit system, be it buses or some sort of shuttles or some sort of enhancements to the existing service.
I asked him if he believes Windsor can evolve to possess a more sophisticated mass transit system or streetcar system in the future.
Am I discouraged at the present moment? Yes. But do I have hope? Absolutely. Because I believe in the next generation of ideas and people who can come up with these ideas. I really hope we can attract good, solid candidates to run for city council and get on the transit board. I hope we can really attract people to come together and form, citizens advocacy groups that can help shape policies and make their voices heard and play a role in making this happen. So, yeah, the Windsorites are very resilient people when they put their mind to it. We've gone through crises and come out of them stronger. We have the ability. I think if people really mobilize on this issue, if they feel very strongly about it, that they can make a difference. Put your name on the ballot, run on an idea, get elected, and raise hell to implement it. And that's the way change comes about. So there is hope. I still believe that there is hope, that we can still transform and be a innovative and transformative community when it comes to public transit and streetcars or light rail transit. We've made some good steps in the past. I think let's just build on that and try to make it happen and shed off this negative, never impossible mentality that sometimes creeps up and gets the best of us.
The reality of a streetcar has the potential to completely revitalize a neighborhood.
The sole presence of a streetcar, the sounds it makes, the motions, the speed it runs on, it's a more vibrant, visible, much more enjoyable thing than taking a say like a big electric bus. Okay. You can call them streetcars, you can call them light rail transit, LRT cars, but they really are, they have their presence, and they're very efficient, and they're very useful, and they work very well in communities. It creates a very, like I said, safe environment, vibrant environment, and it creates a very clean approach to cities where you have less traffic on the streets. When there's less, obviously when there's less traffic on the streets, there's less emissions. When there's less emissions, we have cleaner air to breathe. It's all relevant. Every muffler counts. The heart and the core of this idea is still alive. I think a lot of Windsorites have traveled to other places throughout the country, throughout the continent, throughout the world, and have seen the benefits. And would probably have experienced it and want to appreciate it in their hometown, in their own city. So, yeah, I think there still is an opportunity. I hope one day someone will pick it up and continue the efforts and do a study, get an environmental assessment, see what happens. But until that day comes, who knows?
This is the sound of the Q line, Detroit.
Now back to transportation historian Bernie Drouillard. I asked him what he would like to see the city do when they renovate car 351.
So I would like to go back to exactly what it was. There's curtains in there. They had little buttons in the window frame to push if you wanted for the next stop. You didn't pull a cable, you pushed this little button, and the operator would know somebody wants off at the next stop. And this is how it was. And if you go to look around the downtown area in Walkerville, it's a good example, your houses are all built side by side, very few driveways, because people relied on public transit to get around. They didn't have a car. They used public transit all the time. And the same thing with a lot of the streetcar operators. They all used public transit to get to work in the mornings or at evenings. And back then, the car 351 was a special car. It was one of 4 that was used strictly for the Windsor to Tecumseh line. They call that like an interurban line. It actually had a smoking compartment for people to smoke at one end of the car, which was totally separate to the rest of the people in the car, because you couldn't smoke on a streetcar back then.
On Revitalizing Car 351, we couldn't help but talk about other cities that operate or are planning to operate streetcars.
And I mean, you look at today, Toronto is still operating streetcars. Some people think they're they block traffic, but they don't. They move a lot of people. And right now, you go across to North America, there's a lot of cities besides like Detroit that have gone to the light rail. And it's just coming back. Kenosha, Wisconsin, probably is one of the best examples I use. When the American Motors plant got tore down, and the American Motors and Chrysler gave the property to the city of Kenosha, it was right on the Lake Michigan. They didn't know what to do, so they cleaned it all up, and they bought 5 antique streetcars from Toronto. They laid out a track pattern, and they started operating the streetcars. And the next thing you know, they were building condos, townhouses. They built a marina, the library, and a museum down there. Because now people from Chicago moved out there because it was an hour away on the commuter train. And every day they take the train back and forth to work, but they could live out and they didn't have the hustle and bustle of a big city. And they were right on Lake Michigan. And if you go there today, that little streetcar system with 6 cars operates every day, and people all over come in there just to ride it, bring their kids. Weekends at places really busy. They run these streetcars. So if you build it, sometimes people will come.
Right. Detroit dreams about such an enterprise for some time, but the slow people of that place did not tackle such an enterprise until they saw how Windsor did it. We turned into the slow people with the recent revival of Detroit's Q line.
Detroit today has the elevated people mover since 1987, and now this 3.3-mile streetcar down Woodward Avenue. 2 separate transit projects that are downtown and do not satisfy the transit needs for residents outside of the downtown Woodward corridor. Like the elevated people mover, the Q line has accumulated a lot of criticism. Renard Monchinsky of Detroit Transit Justice Team considered the Q line as an example of transit gentrification. Transit gentrification, and I'm quoting this from Linda Lopez. She published this article called Untokening Panelists Discuss Why You Can't Have Social Justice Without Transit Justice last year in Streets blog Chicago. Transit gentrification is the phenomenon of transit funding being used for projects that largely help real estate developers and wealthier newcomers rather than benefiting current residents who rely on public transportation. Another form of criticism about the Q line. In a Facebook post last year, Detroit's North End Woodward Community Coalition said, "Real community in Detroit didn't want this." And I found this on Twitter, a user named Anthony Broom. He posted about the Q line this year. Going to other cities and using their transportation just continues to dunk on the people mover and Q line in Detroit. What a waste. However, with all of this criticism, very important criticism, And I also acknowledge my outsider status, being the Canadian overlooking this from Windsor, looking at this in Detroit. I want to continue to be optimistic that this will be an asset to Detroit's transportation future, part of a larger network to access the city beyond the downtown Woodward corridor, to move more people across the city than the people mover. Only time will tell.
I wanted to understand the meaning behind Windsor's streetcar history, and I believe Peter Murphy, a writer for Canadian Rail magazine, sums it up quite well here. Streetcars changed how cities were built. Streetcars were a major invention. They changed the way we live.
Thank you to Bernie Drouillard, Al Magnineh, 7 Action News, the Windsor Public Library, and Museum Windsor. This story adapted some of N.F. Morrison's June 9th, 1956 radio sketch about electric streetcars in Windsor and Detroit called Salute and Farewell, published by the Essex County Historical Association. The music you heard in this episode I accessed from the WFMU Free Music Archive, and the following artists are Ada Jones and Billy Watkins, Victor Dance Orchestra, Joseph Samuels Music Makers, John H. Glover Kind, Jockers Dance Orchestra, Vess L. Osman, Poddington Bear, Blue Dot Sessions, and Chris Zabinski. The podcast is a recipient of the City of Windsor's Arts, Culture, and Heritage Fund. Thank you for listening.